you probably didn't stop talking baseball in the off season.
No, I did not. And now I hear you better. Thank you. No, it's been really exciting to see the prospects come in handy and just all the nostalgia all at once. So it's a combination of everything. It's overwhelming. I'm not going to lie, but it's in a very good way.
Exactly. And I want to talk about some of those prospects. That's why we wanted to get you on the show, because it's fun to see the development here of some of the young guys. You put out the top 50 report. I recommend this to everybody that's a Tigers fan, because even if you want to focus on the major league guys, these are guys that are coming. Some of them are already on the spring training roster, McGonigal, Clark, guys like that. But I like that you went with a nice round number, Raj. I know I got obsessed with the number last year. You went with 50, but I noticed there's maybe more than 50.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that in camp too, where for example, it's just like the names that are coming up, like John Peck, that are not the household names. Like everybody talks about McGonigal, he made the cover of Baseball America, but seeing Tyron Lorenzo losing 35 pounds, and then the story that comes out kind of confirms what we're talking about, his struggles, and goes out and hits a home run today. But then, Kelly Salcedo, there's other names. I mean, they're not in camp. Obviously, they're not out in spring training yet, but there's so many depth pieces out there that are coming out to make their. Even Tyler Madison today made a scoreless seventh inning. So I think that the Tigers, as much as we talk about how much they're top heavy, I still think there's some names in here that will get more familiar with Tiger fans as the season goes along.
Well, tell us about some of those names, Raj, because I heard about Peck. I actually read about him before the interview, so he does seem to be somebody that's catching people's eyes. So let's start with him and maybe some other guys, because we covered McGonigal in the last interview, and Clark and some of those guys, because they're the most talked about guys. You guys are very good at uncovering kind of the depth of the Tigers organization. So what have you seen so far, whether it's just kind of leading up to spring training or in camp, where guys have caught your eye like Peck has?
The thing about John Peck is that, and Chris did a really good job with the scouting report, but this is something I noticed in the playoffs last year in Erie. He is first and foremost, he stands out because he's a right-handed hitter, and that stands out because the Tigers are so left-handed heavy, and sometimes his swing can be a little long. He does struggle a little bit with kind of the advanced off-speed breaking stuff, but when he does make contact, he makes really good contact, and his arm is solid. It really, what stood out to me last year was when they called up Trey Cruz at Toledo. When John Peck got called up, at first I was thinking to myself, like, well, this is going to be a challenge for him. And he did pretty well, all things considering, and he showed a better range at a faster level, and he was able to adapt pretty well, holding down the left side of the infield. And I think his arm is above average. His defense is really good, and I think that he makes good baseball instincts plays. I mean, in terms of like going home to first, he's a guy that I really think that the reason why he's turning heads right now is because he does all the little things well. And, like I said, even the reason why I think he wasn't drafted was because we always look at Cape Cod League numbers, the wooden bat leagues. That's the first time foray into it. And that's why his drop stock went down a little bit. But another guy I think that we talked about him a little bit too is Eduardo Valencia, who had a single today off a tough pitch. Valencia is a guy who I think is going to make some more noise as time goes on. He is another reason why he stands out. He's right-handed, but he's also a guy who a lot of prospects like Troy Melton. Talking to Troy Melton last year, he was like, "Tell everybody sleep on Valencia," and I think it's true. And he has the ability to just needs to work a little bit defensively on his first base side of things, but catching wise. But I think Valencia is another story that is going to continue to get better as the season goes along.
I see you've got a player spotlight of him dating back to last August here. So be sure to check that out at TigersMinorLeagueReport.com. But that's what's cool about what you guys do. There's a lot of up-and-coming players, and you get to see the future a little bit. And like you said, you've been able to scout some of these guys, and one of the things we brought this up from the pro level in the last interview, there, I know people are clamoring for a bat at the major league level, and they wanted to sign somebody. They wanted to pursue Bregman last year and this year. They wanted somebody on the left side of the major league roster that can provide another consistent bat. But I would think, I know we're talking about some pretty deep pieces in this pack and some of the other ones, but then also the surface level guys like McGonigal. He's a left side piece that's going to have to come up at some point in time and is making his way to the major leagues. I have to think that some of the guys that they're watching, because obviously they watch their own system more than any other system, and they know better than anybody who's coming up. I have to think the lack of aggression is at least somewhat attributable, could be because of salaries and not finding the right fit, not finding the right culture fit. But I got to think part of it is attributable to, hey, we need to make room for some of these guys that are coming, and we have more faith in them, whether it's Colt Keith, as we talked about last interview, maybe doing a little bit better this year and holding that down better, or McGonigal or some of these other guys coming up. We have more faith in what we have coming, and we don't want to mess up the apple cart too much.
Yeah, and I think when we talked to Ryan Garko a few weeks ago, that was the sentiment we got from him. They really believe in what they have. And if you look at the way they've done the evaluation of guys like, I think of like a guy, for example, like Lucas Elisel, who had a really good year last year as a pitcher down in Lakeland, who started gaining velocity a little bit. There's a belief in their system because they're putting things in place that the Tigers haven't done before. And I know this sounds like it shouldn't be revolutionary to some, but for people that growing up in this area and just growing up and watching baseball as a whole, when you watch other systems develop talent, meanwhile you have 5 players, you can put them off the top of your head, that have been held by the Tigers in the last 30 years, that's kind of a tale of things that needed to change, period. And so I think this is the reason why they're so ingrained into what they want to do, because they've been seeing results from it, and we haven't seen results from it as a fan. And you can go back to, like I said, I've said this before, numerous drafts. I mean, the 75, you were talking about a draft spell between 74 and 77, some of the best drafts Tigers have ever done, historically speaking, baseball-wise, too. You have 2 Hall of Fame, well, 3 if you want to put in Lou Whitaker, Hall of Famers there, and the likes we'll never see probably again. And I'm not saying these draft classes are Hall of Fames, but these are strong draft classes that you're seeing 14, 15 players from their farm system actually contributing to on the big league level.
Exactly. And I do think that part of the reason they're hanging on to these guys and not being more aggressive in the trade deadline last year and seeing some openings at the major league level this year, I have to imagine that's preparing for that. I almost think they're in, you'd be a good one to ask this because I've talked about this the last couple baseball interviews, but I almost think they're getting to the point where they are almost have too much of a log jam at the minor league level because of how well they've done at acquiring talent. It's like, okay, obviously it's a system, the way the Major League Baseball is built, it's a system where you only have so much headroom. You have the major leagues that blocks everybody else in the minor leagues, and then you've got to slot those guys in by position at the appropriate minor league level, wherever they slot and fit best. And it almost feels like they're getting to a point where I was not big on the idea of, hey, let's package a lot of the big-time guys together and get a big name at the trade deadline last year. I was almost looking at it as the opposite of saying, well, hey, a few of these guys are kind of blocked a little bit and maybe free up some room in the minor leagues because they've been very good at identifying talent, and I would imagine they would fill that talent in. And if you can consolidate a couple pieces and not make a huge move, but consolidate some pieces and have that guy fill one of those top roster spots at the majors, then you might be reallocating your assets in a positive way.
Yeah, and and the one thing that is, you bring up a good point about the fact that the abundance of infielders right now. You have Max Anderson, you have Haiyu Lee, and we're seeing a lot of them in camp early on. And I think that, you've seen Lee at third, You've seen Anderson at second, and then they've interchanged, and then you have Ace Young playing first base. They have to do something with that because, I mean, I think that I'm sure with Ace Young's swing changes, we saw the mechanics. He doesn't hold the bat the way he used to. But you see how he's struggling defensively at third, where he struggles to make the throw. So that's where it's like, okay, you got to pause and go, okay, well, now technically you have 3 second basemen. I mean, both Young and all 3 of them can play second base adequately well. Anderson still needs more of a sample size at third base. So it's like the question is, what team out there is going to be interested in something like that? And so that's where you have to see what would fit back, what would the Tigers want in return. And I think right now, what the Tigers would like to see possibly is, based off some of the arms we've seen so far, they've signed maybe a pitcher in return. But there is a logjam there. They have to address it because I think that, a month from now, there might be a team out there that might need a infielder, but the question is, what will the Tigers want in return? But I think they really need to, because it's just, you can't keep, if McGonigal heads north, fine, that makes room for somebody else, but at the same point, development-wise, like Max Anderson, what is he going to be? Is he going to be an outfielder? Is he going to be a second baseman? We'll see. But the Tigers have many. It's a luxury. It's a good luxury for once, actually.
Exactly, it's a good problem to have, but one worth discussing. We're going to take a quick break, but I want to come back with that and talk about some of those pieces that you mentioned, because one of them is the reason I thought of this, actually. So we'll come back with Rogelio Castillo of the Tigers Minor League Report. Stick with us. You're listening to the Sports Project Primetime on Jethro FM. Having a good conversation about maybe some of the guys that we might see as the season goes on, some of the names you haven't heard as much. And I want to talk about this middle tier a little bit, Raj, that I view as kind of the middle tier. We talked about some of these guys that are kind of on the come up and maybe some names that are aggregating a little bit more, and you're seeing a little bit more. And then we talked about the high-end guys that everybody's talking about in spring training. But these middle ground guys, Jace Young is the one that made me think of this, because he was a guy that was accelerating through the system. He was a big prospect. He was probably a guy that would have been able to be traded at one point in time for some decent assets, either as part of a package or as an individual. And not that he's not valuable now, but because there hasn't been the right opportunities for him, he hasn't always had the best fit within the Tigers organization and maybe gotten the best spotlight, because that's what a lot of this is too, is being able to showcase a guy and then another team maybe doesn't fit at your major league level. But to your point, Raj, they say, okay, well, we want some pitching depth, some younger pitchers to be able to replace some of these guys as they age out. And so we want to put those in the system where we need some more arms and trade a guy that way. But it feels like they're trying to shuffle guys around to give them enough of a showcase, which isn't ideal, but is ideal from the standpoint of, hey, we have all these assets that we need to showcase.
Yeah, and it's a good way to put it, because I think that when you look at him playing first base, it does seem a little, I try not to say it does feel, I want to say forced, but it is kind of forced. I mean, they're looking at the way that they build a roster has always been on position versatility, and they're going to do that no matter what. And so I think with Young's case too, we've heard that possibly they were trying to ask around and see what the market was for him, and maybe there wasn't market for him. So that being said, I think going down to Toledo, and we saw this he did an article, Tony Paul talked about it with him, it fired him up a little bit, and he worked his ass off to get back to where he's at. And I think what's going to happen here is that the Tigers are going to have, I think he's forcing the Tigers' hand a little bit, and the same thing with Hyu Lee. Now, Hyu Lee and Max Anderson are kind of in the same boat too, so when are you going to put one of them in the outfield? Or are we waiting for the great outfield experiment to begin? That is another question we're going to see here in spring training. And I think that as the World Baseball Classic kicks off, I believe next week, we're going to start seeing more And I love this part of spring training, the experimentation, because you don't get a chance to see it very often.
What are you looking forward to seeing? Are there certain experiments that you want to have at some point in this year's spring training? And I want to mention again, I mentioned this in the last interview, but if we were to make a bingo card for my baseball segments, High-U Lee would be right in the middle. It would be the middle square because it's the most likely name to be mentioned. I think we have the most High-U Lee name drops per interview in the history of sports radio. I'd just like to point that out. That's mainly thanks to you, Raj, and your crew, but it's everybody that I bring on. We get a lot of High-U Lee references, and I think people think that he's like that I'm like buddies with him or have him as a family member or something, because it's great. But no, those are guys that we do need to see, and I'm curious what you're kind of anxious to see in that experimentation phase.
One of them is Ty Madden. And Ty Madden, now mind you, he's not a prospect anymore, but what we saw today was really encouraging. We saw him against 3 premium Philly bats, and he held his own. And I'm curious to see where the Tigers are going to put him, because we get the news today that Troy Melton has some arse soreness. Or you just let Ty Madden go loose in the bullpen? Because that's an experiment to me that I think is worth looking into, because while the Tigers' bullpen is really good this year, they reinforced it pretty well. Ty Madden comes in there now, and here's a curious case. It's like, so you have Montero. You still don't know what you have from sort of Gibson Long. So where does Madden fit in all this? And so I think, him starting out, maybe possibly put him into your 8th or 9th starter, because you need to go now 10 to 11 deep now these days, it seems like. And so, but then it's also like, well, maybe Madden put him back there just in case something happens where Vest is not effective enough or something like that. So I love to see how they're going to use Ty Madden. That's one experiment. The other experiment is, I think it's intriguing to me as far as from an outfield perspective, is where you have, and I give credit to Cody Saberhagen at Athletic who brought this up. Tigers have 6 or 7 outfielders. How are you going to fit all that in there? And, Jahmai Jones is going to get some more reps in the outfield. The question is, how is he able to handle it? He's a guy who can hit left-handed pitching. Great. Awesome. But can he go play the field on a regular basis? That's another one I'm looking forward to seeing, because the Tigers need, if Riley Green is going to take advantage of this awesome strike zone. We saw 3 walks today. Ryan, we saw history today. And with the ABS there, I think this is going to be a good opportunity to see Riley Green continue to play more in the outfield, or whatever his role is going to be. But at the same time, how's that going to benefit the Tigers? Simple. That gives them more at bats, possibly to put them in a DH situation. But you have to make sure your outfield can play at Comerica Park on a regular basis and with confidence. And so we know Parker Meadows is fine. Is Kerry Carpenter's hamstring is going to hold up? So Jones, to me, is somewhat vital to this situation as well.
I agree. Great points. We're talking with Rogelio Castillo of the Tigers Minor League Report, and these are great points about the outfield as a whole and the team as a whole. Because one thing that they're clearly trying to do, again, we're pointing out good problems to have where you've got some depth in the outfield. Because think of what was happening last year. Jahmai Jones was a bit of a revelation last year when they weren't even sure which 3 they were going to put out there. They had to have the Javi Baez experiment. They had to kind of force Jones along, and he was a fortunate find. And this year, it's nice to have that depth because there's going to be some attrition. But I do think that the key is going to be able to get some guys more rest and kind of size them to the roles that they need. Baez back to more of a utility role. McKinstry in a utility role where he has that positional flexibility that got him to the All-Star game. And then you have those other outfielders where, hopefully you don't have to play Carpenter too much so you're not pushing him physically in that outfield when you do have some athletic outfielders like Meadows that you can put out there, and hopefully he can stay healthy, because there are a decent amount of health questions with those outfielders. So hopefully that depth it will be a good thing, and the fact that they can reinforce that will mean that fresher legs down the stretch, because that's one of the reasons. There's a lot of reasons that things happen, like the downturn at the end of last year, but I do think that guys were fairly worn out. I know it's an up and down game, but the pitching staff especially, and then even some of the hitters, I think they were stretched a little thin with what they were asked to do throughout the season, whereas I think they reinforced the depth this year so that they don't have to do that as much this season, health pending, of course.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where you're seeing like the Corey Dukes of the world and Austin Slater getting those early at bats, and so that of course you're going to expect them to start the season in Toledo, but at some point you might see them at some point in Detroit. So it's good to see Dukes, who had a RBI single today, and he had that home run, I believe, in the first game. So it's just, you're right. But what I find interesting the most about Carpenter is with hamstrings is, and we've seen this time and time again, hamstrings don't seem like the type of injury that it never gets 100%. It always lingers, and so you're hoping that the offseason gave him enough time for that, because essentially I've seen it compared to like shredded turkey or something like that, some weird thing with it. And so I hope that if Carpenter's healthy, this offense is completely different. It's an offense that can give you a chance to win the American League. And you're absolutely right. You saw it kind of drag towards the end in that game against Seattle, which was the extra inning game was so brutal, because it just seemed like the Tigers were just running on fumes at that point. And I don't think the Tigers want to make that same mistake again this year.
Exactly. They were just basically one more healthy pitcher essentially away, and hitter too, but kind of focused on the pitching. I've been burying Tommy Canely today here, Raj. So it's just continuing that. I actually kind of liked him for the most part last year, but he just was what he was. He was limited, and I think he was forced into more high leverage situations than he should have been. And that was kind of the case with a lot of the players, where they were probably forced into action more than their bodies or their minds or their pitch variability could kind of take. So I think that's I think that is something that they're focused on this year, both from what they've done to reinforce the major league level and all of that stockpile at the minor league level that you guys cover so well. And I want to make sure to give you a chance to cover that, and make sure to tell people where to go, because it's great stuff, and you can tell how knowledgeable they are there. We're going to have Chris Brown and others, Raj's partner, there on my show all throughout the season, because they literally do see the future. They're like the crystal ball. They have the crystal ball of the Tigers here. So make sure to tell people where they can follow you guys.
Well, thanks. And we're going to be heading down to the spring breakout game up in next month. So you can find us at TigersMLReport.com. You can find us on Twitter at TigersMLReport. And we also have a Patreon, Tigers ML Report. And so we're doing newsletters. We're doing a lot more videos this year. And we look forward to we cover all, not just the minor leagues, we do the major leagues too. And we look forward to, I think, a really good season coming up.
And Chris will be on my show, Sports Intel, after you guys come back. So we'll kind of follow up on a lot of the points that we talked about on the show here, and we'll have Raj on the show throughout the season as well. But thanks for joining us, and we really appreciate all the information, and we'll look forward to following the coverage during this great year that you predicted.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Raj.
The Sports Project.